The world outside is a dark blur. Trees stretch like bones beyond the window. Headlights carve a narrow path through the night. Marlowe sits rigid in the back seat, hands folded tightly over her belly. Her eyes flick from the rearview mirror to the shadowy shapes beyond the window. She breathes through her nose, small, shallow breaths. In the passenger seat, Bishop, the black Belgian Malinois, watches her. Quiet, not hostile but alert, like he knows something she doesn't. Up front, Officer Thatcher Malone drives, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the gear shift, close to the mounted firearm by his knee. His eyes are fixed ahead, jaw set, every motion careful. Silence rules the car. Thick, tense, electric. Marlowe softly to herself. "Where are we going?" Malone doesn't answer at first, just the steady sound of the road beneath them. Marlowe. "Where are we going?" Malone. To the mirror, calm. "You're not under arrest, Miss Ashford. You're safe. Safe." The word lands like a lie. Bishop shifts, his ears twitch. Marlowe holds her breath. Marlowe. "You didn't read me my rights." Malone. "Didn't have to. You weren't detained." Marlowe. "Then why cuff me?" Malone. "I didn't." A beat. She looks at her wrists. Free. No red marks, no cuffs. Her mind spins. She remembers the feeling of steel, but it's not there. She swallows hard. Marlowe. "You're not with the local police." Malone. "No." Marlowe. "Then who?" He exhales long and slow. Malone. "I work under a special division, contracted through the Bureau and others." She narrows her eyes. Marlowe Rayon. A flicker crosses Malone's face. Barely visible, but there. Bishop glances at him, almost like he heard it too. Malone. "I used to be, a long time ago." Marlowe's eyes widen. Her pulse picks up. Marlowe. "You're one of them?" Malone finally glances in the mirror, locking eyes with her. Malone. "No. I left before the blood started." The SUV hums down a lonely stretch of asphalt, hemmed in by trees. The moon breaks through for half a second, white and cruel, before vanishing again. Marlowe. "Then why are you here?" Malone hesitates. His knuckles tighten on the wheel. Malone. "Because they don't let anyone really leave." Bishop whines low, a sound of unease, maybe recognition. Marlowe clutches her belly, inching toward the door. Malone. Tight. "You're not in danger from me." Marlowe. "I don't believe you." Malone. "You shouldn't. The SUV keeps moving. But something has shifted. The air between them isn't just tense. It's reckoning. Something dark is coming, and they all feel it. Even Bishop. Somewhere far away, a woman with silver hair and a cold stare leaned forward. "She's active," she whispered to someone off screen. "The child is waking up." Then she smiled. "Let them run. We're just getting started. Some answers don't come from the living. They echo from those who stayed silent too long." The motel room was quiet, almost unnaturally so. Marlowe sat on the edge of the bed, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her fingers traced the outline of the dog tag still hanging from her neck. Thatcher stood near the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. Cassandra slept in the chair, one eye always half open. Bishop, exhausted, lay curled at Marlowe's feet, his breathing slow and steady. The warehouse raid had taken its toll, physically and emotionally, but the real weight now came from what hadn't been answered. "I don't remember her ever talking about him," Marlowe whispered, breaking the silence. "My mother, Lena, she kept everything locked away, literally. She had this wooden box with a broken latch. I was never allowed to touch it." Thatcher turned. "Do you still have it?" Marlowe nodded. "It's at my apartment. They tore the place apart, but I doubt they found it. She hid it inside an old piano, the kind no one thinks works anymore." Her voice cracked. "Typical of her. She made everything seem out of tune when, in fact, she was the one carrying the melody." The next morning, with new identities and an unmarked car provided by Cassandra's contacts, they headed toward Marlowe's apartment. The building had been taped off, but Thatcher knew how to get around tape. Inside it was worse than she expected. Every drawer overturned, every picture frame smashed. But the piano was untouched, hidden in plain sight. Marlowe lifted the lid, revealing the aged wooden box inside. She opened it slowly, as if breaking open a tomb. Inside were photographs, black and white, time-worn, of Lena with Hollis laughing beside a military jeep. Documents in Farsi, a worn cassette tape, labeled only, "To her, when she's ready." And finally a small velvet pouch. Inside it, a key, old brass, ornate, with a number etched on the side, 0471. Marlowe stared at it, like it was radioactive. "I've seen this number before," she murmured, her voice barely audible, "in her handwriting, on a map of Arlington." Thatcher's eyes narrowed. "That's not just a key. That's a location. A safe deposit box." Back at the motel, they listened to the cassette. Lena's voice was older than Marlowe remembered, slower, more deliberate. "If you're hearing this, it means you're in danger, and I'm sorry. I tried to protect you from him, from them, from the truth. But you were always going to find your way back. You were born, too." Marlowe's hands trembled. "I never told you about what they did to Hollis, or to me. But what's in that box? It doesn't just belong to them. It belongs to you, and they'll do anything to keep it buried." Outside, the rain turned to thunder. Lightning lit the sky for a single second, and in that flash, through the motel window, Thatcher saw something. A figure, watching. He stood up instantly. "They found us!" Cassandra opened her eyes. Bishop growled, and Marlowe whispered, as if the truth had finally surfaced, "It was never about the file. It was about me. Some truths don't fit in a box. They break everything around them." The train to Arlington was quiet. The rhythmic hum on the tracks was barely audible beneath the weight of what they were about to do. Marlowe sat between Thatcher and Cassandra, the key clutched tightly in her hand like a lifeline. Bishop lay under the seat, unusually still, as if sensing the gravity of their destination. None of them spoke much. The air between them was thick with anticipation, fear, and questions that had no easy answers. For Thatcher, the silence was a battlefield in itself. He could feel the war returning, not the one fought with guns, but the one fought with memory. They arrived just past noon. The sky was gray, matching the stone streets and heavy federal buildings that surrounded the historical district. The bank was old, made of granite, with brass doors and guards that looked more ceremonial than functional. Inside, they were greeted by a receptionist who barely looked up from her screen until she saw the key. Her face changed instantly, recognition, alarm. She stood and called for the manager, without another word. Moments later, a man in a sharp navy suit appeared, introducing himself as Mr. Lon. He led them through a long corridor, past rows of steel deposit boxes. "Box 0471, he said, stopping in front of a vault with dual locks. "This box hasn't been accessed in over 20 years. The account was sealed by request of a Miss Lena V. Ashford. You must be her designated heir." Marlowe nodded, her voice steady. "I am." Lon inserted his master key. Marlowe inserted hers. Together, the locks clicked, and the heavy drawer slid open with a metallic groan. Inside, there was no one, no jewelry, just a thick manila envelope marked "Eyes Only," and a small antique pocket watch still ticking. Marlowe picked up the envelope first. Inside were classified documents marked with military seals, some in English, others in Farsi. Photographs of men in uniform, maps with red lines drawn through desert terrain, and one image that made Thatcher step back. It was a younger version of him and Hollis, standing in front of a base, with a woman just barely visible behind them. Lena. But beneath the papers, there was something else, a DNA report sealed in plastic. The name at the top, Marlowe v. Ashford. And under it, a line highlighted in yellow, Anomalous genetic markers detected. Subject matches. Project Helix profile. Cassandra narrowed her eyes. Project Helix. That's Black Ops level biotech. DARPA started that in the 90s and shut it down when too many assets went missing. Thatcher's stomach turned. You're saying she was part of a program? No, Cassandra said quietly, looking at Marlowe. I'm saying she might be the result of one. Marlowe stared at the paper in her hand, her breath shallow. The truth was no longer hidden. Her mother hadn't just protected her from people. She had protected her from herself. And now, as the ticking of the old pocket watch filled the room, the past and future collided. Whatever I am, Marlowe whispered, they've known since before I was born. Thatcher looked at her, then at the folder. And they're not going to stop now. You don't need to wear a uniform to be a weapon, he said quietly. Sometimes being born is enough. It was behind them. Footsteps thundered through the corridor. RA operatives, fully armed, moving fast. Gunfire echoed as they reached the edge of the tunnel. Thatcher fired back, covering the group as they pushed forward. A bullet ricocheted, striking the wall inches from Marlowe's head. Bishop growled and lunged, forcing one of the soldiers to fall back. In the chaos, Thatcher threw a flash grenade into the hallway, buying them a few seconds. They emerged from the tunnel into a dry ravine behind the facility. A van waited, Cassandra and RA's backup. As the vehicle sped into the desert night, Marlowe clutched the pocket watch from the vault, still ticking steadily in her hand. What now? She asked, her voice shaking. For the first time, Thatcher looked at her, his eyes hard. We stop running, he said, and we start hunting. Cassandra nodded. Because whoever built this program didn't just create you. She looked toward the dark horizon. They created others. If I was the only one, Marlowe said, why did the files list numbers? The safe house in rural New Hampshire was quiet, too quiet. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful but tense, like the world was holding its breath. Inside the cabin, Marlowe sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through files they'd taken from Crest's lab. Pages were scattered around her, worn documents, printed photos, and tapes labeled with cryptic codes. Thatcher leaned against the doorframe, watching her with guarded eyes. Cassandra sat at the dining table with a notepad, trying to build a timeline from the fragments of information. But it was Marlowe who found it. A folded page tucked inside a worn manual. No title, no context, just a list of names, each preceded by the same designation, 6A. She stared at the paper, the names almost glowing against the dim light of the room. I thought I was the only one, she said softly. But I'm not. Thatcher stepped closer, looking over her shoulder. There were 5 names on the list. Marlowe's was the last. These aren't just files, he said. They're identities, subjects. Marlowe pointed to the second name, Kane Ward. I've seen him in my dreams. A boy in snow, running. I thought it was just my imagination. Cassandra looked up sharply. It's not imagination. It's neurological. You're connected somehow, genetically or cognitively. You're picking up signals, shared memory, maybe even instinctual communication. Marlowe's voice was barely a whisper. They didn't just make us. They linked us. Later that night, Cassandra decrypted a flash drive found with the papers. It was a blinking map. 5 red markers scattered across the U.S., each one matching a name from the list. These aren't just identities, she said. They're locations, dormant subjects, probably unawakened. Thatcher leaned over her shoulder. Or already activated. Marlowe stood, the map reflected in her eyes. If I was triggered, they could be too. Or they could be in danger, like I was. Cassandra nodded grimly. And if they are waking up, they won't know who to trust. Thatcher added, that makes them vulnerable. Or deadly. Marlowe walked to the far corner of the room, where the pocket watch from the vault sat on a small table. She picked it up, feeling its steady ticking in her palm. There's something about this watch, she said. Something that keeps showing up in my dreams. I think it's more than sentimental. I think it was used to time something." Cassandra glanced at the network code scribbled on Marlowe's DNA report. That sequence at the bottom, it matches part of this signal. "That watch might be tuned to the beacon," she said. Thatcher looked between the two. "You're saying she can track them?" "No," Marlowe answered quietly. "I think I can feel them." As the team made plans to investigate the closest subject on the list, the map blinked again. One of the markers shifted slightly. Movement in the snowy forests of Oregon. A teenage boy bolted upright in bed, nose bleeding, breath shallow. He looked at the sky as if someone had just called his name. He wiped the blood away with a trembling hand and whispered, "Marlowe." He didn't know her name, but somehow he'd always been waiting for her. The town of Silver Pines, Oregon, was the kind of place people forgot. Quiet, surrounded by forest, buried in snow most of the year. Kane Ward had lived there his entire life, raised by a retired military contractor who claimed to be his uncle. The man was strict, reclusive, and never spoke about Kane's parents. Whenever Kane asked, the answer was always the same. They were lost in service. But Kane never bought that story. Not really. Because sometimes, late at night, he heard voices in his dreams, and sometimes he saw her. She was always the same girl, blonde hair, dark eyes, strong but scared. Sometimes she was in a lab, other times she was running. Kane didn't know who she was, but every time he woke from those dreams, his hands would shake, his chest would ache, and his nose would bleed. He'd stopped telling his uncle years ago. The last time he brought it up, the man had burned a photo Kane had drawn of the girl's face right in front of him. "You weren't made to remember," he had said. That sentence haunted him more than the dreams. That morning, after the strongest dream yet, Kane felt something different, like a switch had been flipped. The girl had whispered something, this time a name, Marlowe. And when he woke up, the old clock in the hallway, untouched for years, was ticking again. He didn't know why, but that scared him more than the dream itself. He went to the basement to the old chest his uncle had always told him never to open, but something inside Kane told him he had the right to now. Inside the chest were medical files, dozens, some with his name, others with codes, 6A02. One file had a picture of him at age 5, hooked up to machines. Another showed his blood under a microscope. Helix Adaptive Subject Ward. His hands trembled. He wasn't adopted. He wasn't orphaned. He was built, trained, kept under watch. His whole life had been contained, and now the walls were beginning to crack. At that moment, he heard tires on snow outside. His uncle was home early. Kane grabbed the files, shoved them into his backpack, and climbed out through the back window. He didn't know where he was going, only that something inside him was pulling him east, drawing him, calling him. The name Marlowe echoed in his head like a beacon. He didn't know her, but deep down he felt like she was the only one who could tell him what he really was. That night, in the cabin in New Hampshire, Marlowe sat by the fire, clutching the map with 5 blinking points. One of them had just moved. Her eyes flickered open. "He's awake." Thatcher looked up from the table. "Kane?" Marlowe nodded slowly. "He's running." Cassandra stepped in from outside, snow in her boots. "Then we better find him before they do. Some meetings aren't chance. They're coded into your blood." The snow fell hard in northern Pennsylvania as the team crossed state lines in the black SUV Cassandra had modified to avoid surveillance. Marlowe sat in the back seat, eyes fixed on the blinking tracker on the laptop beside her. One of the red dots had begun to move, erratic at first, then steady. Heading east. Kane Ward. She didn't know how she could feel it, but it was there. A kind of resonance in her chest, like his presence, pulled something deep inside her into alignment. "He's scared," she said quietly, "but he's not running from me. He's running to me." Cassandra glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "The link between you two is getting stronger. If the helix design included shared neural frequency, the closer you get, the more connected you'll become. Thatcher, riding shotgun, didn't like the sound of that. So what happens when all of them are awake? Cassandra exhaled. Then the experiment is live, and there's no telling what that means for any of us. Marlowe looked down at her hands. They didn't shake anymore. In fact, the more she tapped into that connection, the more focused and in control she felt. Like the chaos around her made her mind sharper. She wasn't falling apart. She was falling into place. Meanwhile, deep in the forest near Scranton, Kane trudged through knee-deep snow. The files in his backpack weighed more on his soul than on his shoulders. His breath came in sharp bursts, his skin numb. But something kept pushing him forward. He didn't know what lay ahead, only that going back meant being erased. Behind him, the faint rumble of tires on snow echoed like a bad omen. A black vehicle, no headlights, moving slowly, deliberately, not looking for him, but tracking him. Marlowe sat up suddenly in the car. They found him. Thatcher turned. Where? I don't know, she said, eyes wide. But he's in danger. I can feel it in my head, like pressure building behind my eyes. Cassandra floored the gas. Then we don't wait for coordinates. We move now. That night, as Kane stumbled across a frozen creek, a voice called out from the trees. Come, cold-controlled asset 6A02. Halt! 3 men in tactical black stepped out from the darkness, weapons raised. Kane froze, heart slamming in his chest, and just when it seemed like it was over, a shape burst from the shadows. Bishop, followed by Marlowe. When 2 pieces of the same code collide, something new begins. Snow exploded around them as Bishop lunged at the nearest RA operative, knocking the man flat onto the ice. Marlowe moved fast, faster than she'd ever moved before. She tackled Kane, pulling him behind a fallen tree just as gunfire lit up the clearing. You're real, he whispered, stunned, his breath fogging in the cold. I've seen you in my head for years. She looked him in the eye, her voice steady despite the chaos. You're not crazy. You're connected. Kane nodded, still shaking. I thought I was losing my mind. No, Marlowe said. You're waking up. Thatcher and Cassandra provided cover fire from behind a ridge, forcing the remaining Rayo agents to retreat. For now. When the gunfire stopped and the snow settled, the forest fell into a tense, eerie silence. Kane looked at Marlowe, stunned. How did you find me? I didn't, she said. We found each other. There was something electric between them now, not romantic, not verbal. Something else, like the feeling of remembering a song you've never heard before, but already know by heart. Back at the SUV, Kane sat with his head in his hands, trying to process everything. The files in his backpack matched the data Cassandra had decrypted, neural links, genetic sequencing, shared memory networks. He wasn't just like Marlowe. He was built with her, the second viable helix subject. Cassandra looked at both of them. There were 5, she reminded them. You're 2. Which means 3 are still out there, and Rayon won't stop now, not after this. Marlowe glanced at Kane. Do you feel it? He nodded. Like static, like someone's trying to speak, but the frequency isn't tuned yet. That's them, she said, the others. Thatcher stepped into the cabin, wiping snow from his coat. We've intercepted chatter. RAEO isn't regrouping. They're preparing for full sweep protocol. They're going to activate whoever's left or eliminate them before we get there. Cassandra stood and looked out the window, where the storm was building again. This was never about survival. It was about selection. You 2 were designed to survive this long. The rest, maybe not. Marlowe stood, a quiet fire in her eyes. Then we don't run any more. We find the others, we bring them in, and we end this before they do. Kane looked at her, surprised. You're not scared? She smiled a little, broken but still standing. I am, but fear doesn't mean stop. She reached for the pocket watch, still ticking steadily. Fear just means now. They were built to follow, but they chose to end it. The old facility in the hills of North Carolina looked abandoned, but Marlowe could feel it. The signal was still alive. She, Kane, Cassandra, Thatcher, and Bishop stood at the rusted entrance, knowing this was it. Deep below, the last 3 Helix subjects were awake. No more running, no more hiding. They descended into the cold tunnels in silence, guided more by instinct than memory. Inside, they found them, 3 others, just like Marlowe and Kane. Marked, modified, connected. No fear in their eyes, just recognition. One of them, a girl, stepped forward. "We've seen you in the dark." Kane nodded. "We came to shut it down." In the control room, Cassandra inserted the final drive. "This wipes everything. Everywhere." Marlowe looked at her, steady. "Do it." When the system went dark, it was like a breath they didn't know they were holding had finally released. The servers shut down. The codes vanished. The hum that had followed them their whole lives was gone. In its place was silence. Peace. For the first time, they weren't assets or subjects. They were simply alive. Human. Outside, the sun broke over the trees as the facility collapsed behind them. Kane turned to Marlowe. "It's over." She shook her head. "Number, it's just beginning. We end what they started. For everyone like us, no more secrets, no more control, just choice. The one thing Helix had never allowed." As they drove away, Marlowe held the pocket watch in her hand, ticking steadily. A voice echoed faintly in her mind. Her mother's voice. "You weren't made to obey. You were made to choose." And as the light touched her face, Marlowe closed her eyes. For the first time, she felt free.